This is a quick overview of how to create a luminosity test print using Adobe Photoshop. These are really helpful if you're not really sure if your file is going to print too bright or too dark. You can make one of these, target a specific area of your image and duplicate it 4 times so that you can see that specific area, and then apply different brightness or luminosity values to those areas and get a printout and check which one looks the best. So to start, open your working Photoshop file. So this is your file that has all of your touch-ups, different adjustment layers, and things that you need. I've already got this one loaded. So the next step is to basically make a merged copy of all of these adjustments into a layer on top of your existing files. What Tom Blanchard calls the claw, which is done by holding Command, Option, Shift, and pressing the key E. When you do that, you see that you get this layer 1 on the top here that has all of the effects applied to it and is built on the top. The next step that we want to do is to select your rectangular marquee tool. Instead of using it under the style normal, we're going to change this to fixed size. And instead of pixels, we're actually going to write 50 and % in here. And then under height, also 50%. What happens now is that anywhere I click on the image, it will draw a rectangular marquee that is 50% of the total area of the image. So I'm going to take an area that's really important. If your test print is like this image, it has a lot of lights and a lot of darks. And so what you would want to do is find somewhere in the image that covers both of those. So that way your test print will show you the bright values in your image and your shadow values, and you'll be able to quickly determine if the image is too light or too dark. So I'm going to target this area, which gets me some of the color here, some of these lighter highlight values, and some of the shadows. What I'm going to do then is I'm just going to create a new layer from this selection 4 times. And so the shortcut for that is Command J. So I'm just going to click Command J once, twice, 3, and 4 times. And so you can see over here, there are now 1, 2, 3, and 4 copies of that center area of the image. Now, selecting the Move tool, I'm just going to move these areas so that they're in 4 quadrants over top of your image. That one needs to go over a little bit more, and then the last one here. So you can see now that's those 4 different pieces that are there, and then this is the stamp that we created just to be able to create these copies. I'm just going to select all of those right now, and I'm going to put those in a new group by just clicking the group symbol at the bottom of the layers panel. And I'm going to rename that Test Print Layers. The reason I'm putting them in there is you can very easily turn those on or off, and then you can see your original file before we started doing this. And also because later on, you're just going to throw this out. Okay, so now that you have each of these 4 quadrants set up, we need to actually create a luminosity change to those values. I also just noticed that I need to move those over a little bit so that we don't have that ugly little gap in the middle. So there we go. That's a lot better. Okay. So the next stage is to create that luminosity curve that's going to show the different values on your test print. So to do that, what you do is you're going to create a new curves adjustment layer. And I specifically want this to sit on top of the test print group. And that's because I want to keep this curves layer later as opposed to this group, which I'm probably going to throw out. So here I'm going to call this like test print curve, or you could call it luminosity curve or something like that. What you're going to do then is you're going to go back to your rectangular marquee tool. Actually, sorry, before you do that, you're going to go into the adjustment itself. And what you want to do is you want to either check something like lighter, which just brings a kind of general brightness across the image, or if you're interested in creating some contrast or things as well, you could manipulate that. But let's just start with lighter. That's a good place to start. And then change the blending mode for this curves adjustment layer to luminosity, because that way it's restricting the image or the adjustment layer from working on the color, and it will only deal with brightness. So right now you can see that mask is white, which means that 100% of the effect of this is being applied. And that's why this whole image all looks very light. And too light in my opinion. So what we need to do here is we need to select the mask so that it's active. Now we're going to go to the rectangular marquee tool and leaving the same fixed size of 50% and 50% up, we're going to make a selection. Let's start with the top left quadrant and make sure that sits directly over top of that first image there. Now you're going to choose your foreground color down on the left panel, and under the HSB, you're going to change the B value to 0, which is pure black. And then what we're going to do is click OK. With that selection loaded, you're just going to click Option and Delete on your keyboard. When you press Option Delete, it fills that area. You can see over in the little preview there, it fills that area with black. Now, if you move that selection over using the rectangular marquee tool, we're going to go back into our foreground color. We're going to change this to 33% or a third and click OK. Repeat the process, click Option Delete. And now we're going to, still using the rectangular marquee tool, move this selection down to the lower quadrant here, lower right quadrant. And we're going to change the foreground color here now to 66%. This will then be Option Delete filled in that area. At this point, you can click Command D on your keyboard to deselect, getting rid of that little rectangular marquee. And what we've created now is 4 quadrants that are on top of this repeated image that have different levels of brightness. So the top left has a black mask over it. So that means that there's absolutely none of this curve adjustment being applied at all. The top right has 33% of that adjustment being applied. The bottom right has 66% of the adjustment, and the bottom left has 100% of the adjustment. And if you option click on the mask itself, you can see that that's what's happening in the underlying mask. Black, 66% gray, 33% gray, and then 100% white. So that's what's happening kind of in the mask. Okay. Option click on that mask, and it brings you back to the image. So the next step is to actually print this image, but you don't print your working files. These are just here to provide a good point to go back to and build on. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to go to Image, and we want to go Duplicate. And here we're going to add the word test or test print at the end. And to make your life easier, check duplicate merge layers only, since we are going to be flattening this in when we go to print. Okay. So now I can see I'm working on the test version of this file that's been flattened. What we need to do at this point is we need to go to Image, Image Size, and resize this file for the output that we are going to be doing. So in my case, I'm going to be putting this on a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. And so I just want to make sure that this image is well within the printable area of the page. And so what I'm going to do in that case is I'm just going to make my width 10 inches, which would mean that I have a nice 1/2 inch on either side. And I want to change the resolution to 300, which is the print resolution for the digital print facility, or the PIC, here at TMU. And because I'm scaling this image down, making it smaller, I do want to have resample checked, and I want that resample algorithm to bicubic sharper. Now, if you were enlarging this image, actually making it larger than it physically is, you would choose another algorithm, such as Preserve Details 2.0, which is generally the best option. But in this case, I'm reducing the size, so it would be to bicubic sharper reduction. Then I click OK. At this point, if you wanted to, you could apply sharpening as well if you wanted to see a test. But the issue with sharpening at this stage is your image is not necessarily going to be the same size as your final output. This is more about just getting the brightness correct. So you don't have to apply sharpening before printing at this stage. Although you certainly could, if you were going to be printing it, the final image at this scale, you certainly could apply some sharpening at this stage in this test printing process as well. Now what you would do is you actually either send this file into the DPF or manually print it yourself on your choice of paper surface, and go to one of the viewing booths or the type of light source you'll be looking at this image under. Decide which of these 4 quadrants you think is the best, looking at your finished print. If you've done a good job managing your file and you're looking at a pretty color calibrated monitor, maybe your first quadrant, the one that's having none of the effect applied, is actually the best, but maybe it's the one that allows 33% of it passing through, or 66. Either way, once you've decided which one is the best, you're going to return to your working file, where you have this test print curve that's live here. And so with that up, what you're going to do is you're going to press I on your keyboard or select the eyedropper tool. And making sure that that mask is active, you're going to pick the quadrant that you think looks best. In my case, that's going to be the one here, 33%. To allow to just light it up just a little bit. So when I select that, you can see the foreground color change to that 33% gray. And now the nice thing is all you have to do is press Option and Delete again to fill the foreground color. And that mask that previously had 4 quadrants in it is filled to a gray. And that means that the same amount of brightness or luminosity is being applied across the whole image. And at this point, you can either turn off your test print layers here, which I stacked into this convenient group, or, and this is probably my preference, simply toss them out, because if you've got your brightness set where you want it, you probably know you don't need to be doing this stage again, and I like to have nice clean working files, so I would actually just drag this whole test print layers into the trash. And that's why I said to make the test print curve separate from the group, so that you know you can just leave that up there. And so there was before, and then there's after, which just shows you that little extra boost in the case in this image to bring in a little bit more lightness across the whole image. And then that you would just save so that you have this attached to your working file, and it stays there for future printing purposes exactly as you had it set. And one last note is that while this demo was focused on using a test print with luminosity, making the image lighter, you could also use this to make the image darker, or use the test printing process, with a hue and saturation layer if you wanted to see 4 different quadrants of varying saturation, or any other adjustment that you want to see spread out across 4 different kind of variables. So it's just a very convenient way to be able to do a variety of different little tests.